Awesome, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Dev in the Details, where we talk about the practical impacts on AI and what's blocking people from deploying it into production. Today, I've got a very timely guest on the show, Travis McPeak. He was the former co-founder and CEO of a security startup, Resourcely, former head of product security at Databricks, and a security manager at Netflix. And now he's working on leading security at Cursor. It's been a crazy week, so we're going to have a lot to talk about, from everything about OpenClaw and the rise of AI agents to what that's meaning on the SaaS Meltdown, and even Maltbook going viral. So it should be a really fun one. And Travis, welcome to the show.
Hey, awesome to be here.
Awesome. Now, Travis, we've actually, funnily enough, gotten to know each other mostly through ski destinations and trips that we've done. So we were at a trip a couple of years ago with our mutual investors when I was running Predabase, you were running Resourcely, Felicis. And we just caught up again about a week ago at a CISO event where we had about 15 to 20 security leaders from large and small organizations meeting up in Park City. I actually didn't realize until the CISO event how deep your security background actually was. I'm curious if you might be able to tell us a little bit, how did you first get into security? And then some of the highlights maybe from your time at Databricks and Netflix.
Yep. So I loved security always. It's just, I have what I call like an adversarial mind since I was a kid. So if there's some kind of rule or system, my mind immediately goes to, I want to get around that. Like I don't respect the authority of that. I want to figure out how to like break it. So I think that leads itself to being a lawyer maybe, or security. And I just loved computers and got into security. Now, at the time I was doing that, like I started doing like very early security stuff when I was probably 8. There was not really like an established security industry. It wasn't a job that you could go do. But I got very lucky on timing in the sense that when I was coming out of all of the school, it was finally like ramped up as a job. So I actually did not start in security. I started in QA. I didn't realize at the time what that meant. And I was a little bit disappointed, but I immediately gravitated towards actual security work, and I've been there ever since. So doing security with an actual security title for probably 13 years now.
What was the very first security project you ever worked on? So you started in QA and were breaking your way into what you actually loved more, which was maybe breaking things, whether those are rules or otherwise. What was the first security project that you ended up diving into?
Yeah, like I didn't enjoy QA as it was supposed to be once I joined and figured out what it was. But I learned automation and how powerful that is. And really, QA is just a flavor of security. You're trying to do the opposite of like whatever the developers of the system intended and find edge cases. And it turns out that security is a flavor of that. So first thing I did in QA was I had what was supposed to be a bunch of manual test cases. I was going to like click through and validate. And I'm lazy. I'm not going to do that. So I wrote a Python script that made a big combination and then ran through the test cases and then dumped them all into this awful system we were using called HPQC for the Symantec DLP product. So I created the most amount of test cases that anybody's ever put into that system, and it started to fall over. And then from there, quickly, it was like, okay, cool. All of those are done. Like I didn't have to spend that 3 days clicking through awful boxes and whatever. I'm going to start poking at the security properties and like put up tests for that as well. So that's really the first time I ever did it on the Symantec DLP product back in 2011.
Symantec DLP, wow. And I feel like DLP as a market has continued to be a thing in some shape or the other, data loss prevention for those that might be less familiar, ever since. I feel like that, both before that point and afterwards too. After this part though, like in the Symantec DLP side, you've worked for some of like the most respected tech companies, I think, that are in the Silicon Valley. Netflix and Databricks, both come in mind, I think, for anyone's like top 10 of, large tech companies with excellent engineering practices. And a lot of times what we assume are also excellent security practices. What was it actually like inside those two companies? Similar, different? What did you learn?
Yeah, it's funny. Like I would say both Netflix and Databricks have very, very quality security programs, but any company, if you talk to the people that work there internally, like it's never as good as it's perceived externally, right? Because it's like, okay, you have your stuff together, the basics, but like if you're in the security team and you are doing your job well, there's always risk and you're aware of those risks. So like internally, you're like, oh, this thing's a mess, that thing's a mess. Netflix and Databricks both had like very quality security, but they were just oriented very differently. So Netflix was in consumer. At the time I was there, they had like functionally like no compliance. They had SOX as a public company, and they had like a little like PCI corner that they kept everything in that dealt with the credit cards. And other than that, there was no compliance to worry about. And you might wonder, like, why does Netflix even invest in security? Because it's like, okay, you compromise and you get like Brad Pitt's dietary preferences. Like, what are you going to get? Like, credit
Hey, I
cards can be
worked really
rotated.
hard to steal credentials to be able to use my Netflix account.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's not a lot there, but Reed, the CEO, really cared about security and just invested in it heavily. And we took because we weren't burdened with compliance, we took a very, like, we just want to solve like real security problems on behalf of engineering. Like, we're a service team, and if we're doing our job well, all these other folks don't have to worry about the security stuff. So that was the approach there. Databricks, also a very quality security team, very smart people doing it, but totally different angle. Like, they had just tons of compliance from the beginning and like giant enterprise stuff. Their risk profile is way higher. Like, they have, very sensitive data that they process. So everything has to be a much more like conservative, slow, deliberate approach. And I think, both are super valuable. That taught me that good security can actually be implemented like quite differently depending on your circumstance. I'm happy I did both.
And I think, Databricks, Netflix, highly respected engineering cultures. And in a lot of ways, what I've at least heard, engineering-led, developer-led, there's been a trope, I don't know whether you think it's true or not, in Silicon Valley that like engineering and security don't always get along, right? Like the developer just wants to go ahead and pull off everything that they can and ship as quickly as possible. Security is trying to say no. Now, last week when I think we met a lot of the CISOs, it was clear nobody wants to be in that camp of saying no, but it feels like it's a stereotype that actually, comes up quite frequently. What was it like at Databricks or at Netflix, like in terms of the relationship between eng and developers and the actual security teams?
Yeah, I don't think we ever said no that I can remember to anything at Netflix.
Wow.
Like, our job, there is, let's figure out how to do what you're trying to do. Because like whoever it is that's asking us, they're trying to do something important for the business. And us coming and saying like, no, it's not worth it, like don't do it, is not going to help. So our job is always like, why, instead of doing it that way, why don't you do it this way instead? And we'll make it easy for you to do it that way. Like at Databricks, just given their risk profile, like no was a lot more on the table. It's just like that thing is too risky. Like we need to go back and like reevaluate how we're going to do that. And still, even then, like whatever somebody's working on is important to the business. So it's not like a durable no. It's like this is too much risk for us to handle at the moment.
Do you feel like Cursor today is more like Netflix or Databricks? Because Cursor is working on code bases, which is, I feel, more similar to the high sensitivity nature that Databricks might be on than what I'm looking to stream. But what's been your experience?
Yeah, so Cursor has what we have access to, and like the trust that's put in us is closer to Databricks than Netflix for sure. Like we have more to protect. However, the approach that we've taken to date is much less no, because it also culture comes into play here, right? So Netflix is a like deliberately fast moving, let's get stuff done, let's ship. Databricks is like let's make sure and get this right. At Cursor, like we also want to get the stuff right, obviously, but we want to ship fast. Like especially this space is growing so quickly that if we have to slow everything down, like we're just going to fall behind and we're not going to be the best AI coding solution for everybody. Yeah. So with that, our job, we staff security software engineers generally on the security team. And if something needs to be done in a different way, and that way is significantly more work, then we're happy to pitch in, because whoever comes to us trying to get something done, like I really care about their success. Like the last thing I want to do is say like, we can't do that. I would love it if we can do that thing. So I'm happy to pitch in and support them on whatever it is they're trying to get done.
No, I love it. And I feel like I've almost seen like the evolution of like these engineering top tech talents. And I think that some number of years ago, like the very, very top tier of engineering talent probably was at Databricks or like similar companies to now. What I'd see today is probably like the very, very top tier, probably at AI native companies like Cursor. And, of my friends that work there, I think if I were to rate any of them, they'd definitely be in like the top percentile. So having that strong communication is probably easier when you can really trust the people on the other side to be very good at their job, both in security and in engineering.
Yeah, I was explaining this to somebody. So there's like a point in time, right? If you are like top talent, you're probably expensive and you probably want to work on cutting edge stuff, where you're learning and are growing. And so that's like a place and time situation. So if we've reverse 15 years ago, like that was probably Google. Like they just got hit by Aurora. They're like, we got a bunch of stuff we need to figure out. And so then given that need, you're willing to pay for top talent because you need to get like really cutting edge stuff done like very quickly. But eventually like things stabilize. It's like, yeah, we figured most of that out. And then it doesn't necessarily make sense to pay for like the top talent. And meanwhile, those people are like, okay, well, I'm not solving as much new stuff as we did before, so I'm going to go find the next thing. I think this is a natural evolution. I mean, to be clear, like Databricks is a very fast growing company, has a ton of talent also, but meanwhile, also we have these AI companies that are like completely brand new where we have a whole bunch of stuff to figure out. And the companies themselves are like relatively new.
And before Cursor, Travis, you were building a startup doing simple, like as I think about it, like simple self-serve, secure cloud setup, again, targeted mostly towards engineers. You can tell me how much of that I got correct or maybe incorrect. But what I'm curious actually is in building a startup, things are so hard. What was your proudest moment at the startup? And tell us what was the most painful lesson that you learned while building too.
Yeah. So Resourcely was the goal. Take this thing that we had at Netflix, which is what we called paved roads, and make them available to the market, which is such a common pattern that like VCs look for it. Maybe Netflix is like a little bit ahead in whatever they're doing now, like everybody else is going to be doing in 5 or 10 years. And that works out a lot. What I learned running the company, like top level, is that there are some aspects of Netflix that mean it's never going to be like the rest of the market in certain ways. So, we are hiring security engineers, and security engineers are willing and excited to do certain kinds of work that like other types of security folks don't want to do. And so for that reason, it was limiting in a way that I didn't know when I started of just how big the market could be. I thoroughly enjoyed the process of running a company. The biggest benefit is I leveled myself up a ton. Like prior to running Resourcely, I thought I was just a security engineer. And, I can be flexible in security engineering and do a lot of good stuff for the business. But what I learned running the company is I can jump into marketing or product or sales or whatever, like HR, like whatever it is that I need to do for the company in the moment, and learn enough about that to be effective. And I keep those skills now. So if at Cursor, I can do product stuff, I can do go-to-market stuff, I can help like wherever I'm needed. And that's just like very liberating, and also makes me feel like I have a bunch of new skills now. I really enjoyed the learning of the company. Like some parts of it, to be honest, were like very hellish. So in January of 20...
Tell us about that pain, because man, I feel like startups are glorified, especially in this AI wave where everyone's going, 0 to 100 in 10 months or something insane like that. Cursor, I think, being one of those startup companies. But tell us about like the flip side. What were the hellish, painful things you learned?
Yeah, totally. So I mean, as a founder and like the CEO at that company, by default, every single problem in that company is my problem. Like there might be somebody else that's on it, but at the end of the day, if that thing doesn't work, it's my problem. So number one is like that never turns off. There's no point when I was running that company where some part of my brain that was significant wasn't occupied with like some problem that was going on. Like, oh, sales are hard. Why are sales hard? How do I figure that out? What am I going to do? And then you have a ton of responsibility, right? Like all the employees, all the investors, like you have a ton of personal identity wrapped up in the thing. If the company sucks and fails, like I'm going to feel stupid, like very publicly and whatever. So there's all this stuff going on that you just don't have for normal jobs. And when things are bad, like it is your job to fix, like in a job, if you hate it or like it feels really bad, you can always just be like, all right, I'm done with this job. I'm going to go get a new job. Like your job as a founder CEO is to go down with the ship and figure it out before then. Like make the ship not go down. But if it is going down, you're the last person off. So there were days where like, we were struggling and I didn't know why we were struggling. We'd already tried 9 months of like various like go-to-market stuff. And I would wake up at 2:30 in the morning and just be like, I can't go back to sleep. I need to do something today. I have no idea what that thing's going to be, but like, I need to take some actions and like try and figure this out. And then just like stew over it for 2 hours and be like, okay, well, I've tried A, B, and C. I could try D or a different version of C, and then go execute those and like completely get my ass kicked. And then next day, same thing. I'm up at 2:30. I'm stressed and whatever. So like, it's very like full ownership. Like that's, also the good part when it's all up and to the right, it's like full ownership. It's like, I birthed this thing and it's killing it. But now like on the bad side, it's like, I birthed this thing and it's like really struggling and it's like my baby and it's my job to fix it.
Yeah. I met one founder who had an alarm on his phone every 30 minutes, starting at 2:30 a.m., 2:30 a.m., 3:34, because they were so paranoid about like whether or not the customer services were going down that people were using them for. And I was like, that is a tough way to live. And I think that that's like a painful reality of the startup building process that people don't end up talking about. The last question I want to ask you on this is, I find that you learn a lot through failure. You also learn a lot through success. And there's a lot of failure before that success. What do you think was the single most painful but valuable lesson that you learned during the building of the company?
It's a great question. So the single biggest lesson that I learned that was painful was that I didn't know how to validate a market. So like I did all of this work. I read the mom test. I was like, it's very important for me to find out if people actually care about the thing that I'm spending all of this effort to build early. And I really tried to do that and was like proud of the level of effort I put into doing that, but I did it like very ineffectively and like it cost us a lot. If I had come to these people and said, hey, I want to build Resourcely and describe what it is and ask about their pain and whatever, and say, are you interested in this? And they're like, yeah, Travis is a good guy. Like, seems cool. That may feel like good signal. That's no signal. Like, seems cool, like means nothing. There's this like kind of code in business, which is like, oh yeah, this is interesting. Let's chat next year. Like that thing equals like, I don't care about this. It's never going to happen. Yeah.
Next startup, move on. Yeah.
Next year is never. So really like what I needed to do is I needed to force like very early on. First of all, I spent 2 years to build something. It's way too long. Like next time from the beginning, I'm going to, you can all remember I said this, I'm going to pretend like I have a thing. It's going to look very compelling. And then I'm going to go out and I'm going to start selling it. That thing that I'm selling, if it's compelling and like people are like, yes, I want that now, I will buy it. Like, when can it be ready? Like, that's the signal I'm looking for. If I get anything short of that, it's going to be like, go find something else that's better. That's number one. And number two is I'm going to make sure that I can deliver it in 3 months.
Yeah, I love it. There's two things that it makes me think about from my time at Broadbase. I think the first was when we started the company, one of the best pieces of advice in retrospect I got was go talk to your customers, give them the pitch, and then ask them, is this an 8.5 out of 10 on pain or more? And if it's not, move on. And I remember hearing that in the time, I think I had the mentality like, look, if it's an 8.5 out of 10 on pain, great. But if it's not, like, I just need to be a better salesperson. I should convince them that they need this, etc. Wrong. Like it is so hard to get people to care that this needs to be like a top 2, top 3 priority for them. Otherwise, we'll talk next year. And that's going to be the death of the startup. The second, favorite thing that I had from another founder who gave me this piece of advice, he said, nothing takes longer than a week. And it's a crazy controversial statement as we were doing our quarterly roadmap planning. But his entire point was like, validate what you're doing in like weekly or every 2-week sprints, basically. And I think both of those, seem like they're basically similar messages that like we both started to get.
Yeah, I had this like very like bad trap, obvious in retrospect, but I had this idea like for a little bit of detail in the company, we were going to help developers get secure infrastructure set up. They never enjoyed, fiddling with infrastructure. It's complex, and I was going to solve security problems. So I thought in my mind we needed a way that developers engage with it and the like policy security part. And I never figured out how to separate those two. But given that like neither one of those things was like able to stand on its own, that should have been the signal to me. Like, if it's just like developers can do stuff and deploy it quickly and easily, great, go build that and sell that. And then like, oh, security wants stuff on top, go build that later. But since neither one of them felt compelling enough to stand on its own, that should have been a signal to me, like none of this is important.
Let's apply this to now a company that has clearly, like, I think found, not only product market fit, but some of the strongest signal for that too, which is the company you're at now, Cursor. Tell everyone a little bit about Cursor and why you think in a relatively crowded coding generation market, this thing that some people just call the simple VS Code extension has won so much market share, crossed $1 billion in ARR. Like, what do you think has actually really resonated with Cursor? How do you define what Cursor is in your own words?
So the company mission is to create the best way to code with AI, like period. Like just everything that goes into that, the interface, all of the dealing with the agent, making that really good, explainability, bug finding, like all of it. A whole bunch of stuff that I didn't mention and like things that we don't even know about yet. Like that's the mission, like pursue that all the way to the end. So there's a ton of legs there and we are extremely focused on that thing. And we care a ton about hiring and only hire people that are very autonomous and also care about the company and are able to go and try things, experiment, learn very, very quickly. So I think
for that in hiring, by the way.
Like, yeah,
I think everyone wants to hire. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean it's hard. Like there's first of all, there are some people that are definitely not angled that way, and it's like, important to find out early. We have a very high number of former founders at the company, so like that's pretty good signal. If you are a former founder, then you have a ton of experience having to do that kind of, find the path now and go do the impactful stuff. So that's one. But in general, we also do trials with people. So we will give them a project and be very deliberately vague on how they should go execute that project, because we want to see what they do, and then they'll present what they did and we'll ask them questions about it.
What did Cursor do right to grow so much faster than the entire code generation and AI coding market has grown? And I think Graphite was a company that Cursor acquired not too long ago that was around code reviews. GitHub Copilot was one of the first big breakout use cases. But when you think about the most successful companies that are AI native, you think about the frontier labs like OpenAI and Anthropic, but then pretty much next up, you think about Cursor. Like, what did Cursor get right, and what's the big challenge that's now going to be ahead of it?
Yeah, so my perspective on this, like others in the company may have different perspective, but my perspective is being in the right place at the right time for a startup in general is just hugely important. So I think if Cursor started 3 years or 4 years earlier than they did, it would have been harder. So they had the right focus at the right time. Like this is right when AI coding was becoming very compelling. If you think 2 years before, like just Copilot like blew everybody's mind. Maybe not even 2 years before. Maybe it was like a year before. So they were at the right place to execute, and then they just had very devoted execution on that thing. Like they, from the beginning, just wanted that to be a really good AI coding experience. And AI itself, like coding, I would say is the best use case for AI today. It's really a function of the validation that can go. So if an agent knows that it's on the right track, then you can train them better. It ends up better at that task. And coding is verifiable in a way that's bounded. Like you write code and it either compiles or it doesn't. So you get a good feedback loop, and there's a ton of coding to do. And finally, there's this nice like reinforcement cycle where if you're using AI to also build like AI coding, you get this like acceleration loop. So I think it's just a combination of those things. And the product was magical. I remember the first time I used it, I was like, wow, this is so impressive. Like I didn't know AI was able to do this now. And they've just had that like devotion to executing on that.
My assumption would be that working in security at an AI coding company, though, would be an absolute nightmare. And let me tell you why that is. Number one, I think that if we think Databricks is sitting on like really sensitive data that people need to do warehousing, ETL pipelines, and others, code for a lot of these organizations is really core IP. And code also gets access to production systems, databases, the ability to go do things. So people have to decide, what's the level of permissioning there. But hallucinations have pretty big blast radiuses. And I think that when I consider Cursor as a company that's like in an AI native space, I think about like fast credit card swipe, consumption oriented, people are like starting to use it. But when you graduate towards like larger enterprise use, all of those constraints in terms of like how secure is this environment ends up becoming a huge thing. Plus, I think all the headlines you see about, well, AI is writing a lot more code, but is it secure? So if you were to think about like being, thinking around security for the code generation tools like Cursor, what do you think are the top 2 or 3 things that both customers are really concerned about, and like maybe the top 2, like, similarly, what are the top 2 or 3 priorities that you have as a security leader there?
Yeah. So I like that framing. So there's product security. What are the controls that we offer to customers? What are the defaults? Like, how do you get somebody that doesn't want to spend like a whole day learning about your controls and give them a good balanced experience? And then there's like the internal like security risk management. Like for anybody with a product, there's always those 2 dimensions to it. So for the product security stuff, we have invested in sandbox and enterprise controls and visibility. So you as an organization are willing to set tolerances that you have about what you want your people to do, and then get assurance that like the way that people are using Cursor are going to meet those standards. I've been involved with projects like Sandbox that are very impactful there, allow us things like that. Like that's all of that component. And obviously we do a ton of, we have a vulnerability management program. We take the reports very seriously. Like we love when the community will help find issues and we can bring those to our attention and fix them quickly. I wouldn't say like any of that part is like very concerning to me. When I came to the company, as you mentioned, like we have code data, and there's a very like well paved path for how you handle this problem, which is like you keep those pipelines in like the most isolated thing possible. So I mentioned we had Netflix and we had the PCI environment. Like that was a deliberately like locked down box like for a reason. Like when you have a small box, then it's easy to audit and review all the controls and like see what's happening with it. So that's really the approach we take, is like, sure, we have an environment, things are moving fast, but really that data is like precious, and we should keep the surface area of that as minimized as possible. So I've spent a lot of time that I've been here just auditing, reviewing, and hardening those systems, and I'm very happy with the work that we've done.
And when you think about the code quality and outputs that Cursor is creating, I think that it's fundamentally predicated on like model improvements, which have been getting better and better over time in terms of maybe the range of outcomes that you can do. And then Cursor likely has some amount of its additional magic that helps close last mile problems. But one thing that I think's talking to some security leaders on AI coding tool, as they think about assessing AI coding tools, is it's intended to increase productivity. So you get a lot more net new code per engineer. And I think what we oftentimes see is there is actually more code being written. But the concern they have now is like, well, have we actually caught up in terms of code security and like the actual, tests and validation we need to run? Some of the studies that I think Frontier Labs and others have put out indicate maybe no, maybe that, automatically an AI generated code tends to be less secure than if like a human was writing it. And so now we're not only increasing the volume, but the relative proportion of it might be ones that are more prone to different vulnerabilities that we might see. How do you think about addressing these concerns if you're like, let's say, a Fortune 500, leader who's being told by all his Silicon Valley buddies, you got to get this coding agent tool, Cursor, and now it's like, well, I'm going to have even more to my team has to review, and we're already underwater.
Yeah, great question. So I'm going to say probably some spicy stuff, but I think that we're being like way too precious about like, oh, we're losing this thing that we had that was good. Like, no, we had secure development training. Like nobody paid any attention to it. The defect rate of security of developer written code is quite high. We've never been good at like reviewing comprehensively for security issues. I mean, if we were so good before with all the training and review, like why does Windows have 40, like urgent patches every single month, right? Like this stuff is just hard. Now, at the same time, if you take an AI agent and you're like, just please write all of this stuff, and you don't look at it and you ship it, like that is not a good way to use these tools. Like that's not what I recommend. If I merge code, I review every single line of it and I understand it. Now, in addition to whatever it is I'm thinking about, maybe I'm not in security, I'm just an engineer. I took, the mandatory security training 8 months ago and I forgot about all this stuff. What you can do now with an agent is you can just say, go and find these types of issues, or you can have a system that comes onto like a pull request and go say, like, go find these types of issues and then give feedback. And to a developer, they might be like, this is annoying, I don't understand it. But to an agent, it's just going to do that thing. So I would say like this has gotten like way better. And if you look at the base rate of the frontier models now and the code that they write, especially with feedback versus the base rate of developer code, like when they took the training 8 months ago, I think we're already an improvement, and that thing's only getting better.
So would you say that the workflow that you see inside of Cursor is different than like, hey, agent, go read this and go write this loop and maybe I'll review it or not? You actually have agents that are looking at, for example, the mandatory training documents and then seeing if it matches up with the standards there. What are the ways that this actually ends up becoming the most effective in practice?
Yeah, I mean, so I'm very like bearish on mandatory training in general. I think people do it and check the box and like they're, scrolling their phone or whatever while they're doing it. But like agents will keep attention on that kind of stuff and you can put them through validation loops. So it's not, I mean, sure, like go read the internal docs is a good thing to do. But in addition to that, having some agent or set of agents that goes and reviews every single change, and that agent is specifically prompted for finding security and understanding the impact of security. Anything that comes out of the agent, like it has to prove that it's actually good. So it spends a lot of thinking cycles, like actually getting to that point. That amount of effort is strictly better than like most humans are capable and willing to do. And you can't scale the humans to that level, but with agents you can. So every single change you can review in significantly more depth than you could do before.
Do you think in a few years non-engineers will use Cursor?
I don't know. So that's like a direction thing. It's above my pay grade. We have built the company to be really good for developers who are writing code. I think that there are other platforms that cater specifically to like my mom wants to open like a web shop kind of thing. But in the future, all things are possible.
Yeah, definitely, especially at the rate pace that I think things have been going to. What do you think is the argument that you would tell a CISO who's assessing like an AI coding tool but is looking to be able to see, is this going to be something that introduces net new vulnerabilities? Like, and the CISO's just thinking about their surface area, their remit, which is reduce risk towards the business. What would you say is like the stack either of other tools the CISO needs to get, or what do they need to get with just to get comfortable with the fact that AI coding tools are going to start entering, whether that's Claude Code, whether that's Cursor, whether that's Graphite, whether that's Codex, any of the different ones. What's the stack that they need around the actual code generation agent for the CISO to be comfortable?
I don't know. I mean, CISOs have like a lot of risk tolerances and opinions. It's like obviously going to depend on the business and the culture and like what the CISO is thinking about. Like there's a bunch of stuff that goes into that. In general, though, like I wouldn't treat AI coding right now as like a separate entity where it's like, oh, like Claude's entering my environment. I don't understand about Claude. I would say like my developers now have a new tool. And like in Cursor, like that tool presents itself like in their IDE. So it's still the developer and they're still responsible for their stuff. Now, to your earlier point, people are producing more code, right? Like this is the whole point. Like you can move faster and have more assurance. It's not like a pick one, you actually get both. But at the end of the day, like we've always had a defect rate. I think based on like previous conversation, that defect rate will actually go down if you're using the tools correctly, but there's more of it and like we can't scale. However, the security team has AI tools also. So what I just said about you have agents that can go review and find stuff. I think we've never had so much ability to get involved as a security team when we can add value. Now that we have these like agents that can just go scour looking for stuff. So I would say like our ability to use tools as security has kept up with developers. And like the wrong answer is this is, risky and like it's not going to go in the business. Like you are going to lose that battle. Like AI is too important to just sit on the sidelines and do nothing, in my opinion. Like maybe there's like very heavily regulated that like I don't understand, but for the most part, people want to use these tools. And if your job in security is like, nope, don't use it, like none of this is safe, I think you're going to have a bad time. What I would urge you to do, I actually did a webinar earlier today, like showing how I use Cursor for security. I would urge anybody in security to go look into those workflows because there's really powerful stuff that you can use both for yourself and to give to your developers.
I love it. We should link out to that webinar, especially if you did the live demo. I feel like those are my favorite. One of the things I find as like a practitioner or a user of these AI tools is like 100% agree. Everyone's going to have to end up using them. People want to use them. It's better for the business. This stuff gets way better once I give it access. And like access is almost like a little bit of a drug where I am annoyed when I use Claude Code locally and it'll say something like, oh, web search is disabled, for example, on this network or the other. I'm like, this is terrible. Like this is blocking me from being able to do the things that I sort of took for granted. And I think what we have to talk about too is OpenClaw, where I feel like that ended up going to a whole nother level in terms of like where these models were starting to run locally, get a lot of access. And we even at Rubrik received an email from our IT and security team saying, as a reminder, please do not download these random open source packages and start to be able to run them. Tell us a little bit about what like OpenClaw is meant for agentic. Can you define OpenClaw for the audience? And like, what's your point of view working on like a company that basically is doing local and coding agents? Like what's your point of view and for what OpenClaw means for the future of AI inside of orgs?
Yeah, so the other webinar I did like coincidentally ended up being OpenClaw too. So I just like I'd heard about it and I hadn't like paid a lot of attention and I wanted to show how I use Cursor to do stuff. And I was like, okay, this will be fun. I'll just do it on OpenClaw. So last night when I was recording all of the screen shares I did, I ended up digging into it a little bit. But generally what it is, like we have seen all of the stuff that like AI coding can do. And, as an individual, I've thought like, wow, I don't like going through all my emails or like, my nephews have a birthday coming up. It'd be awesome if I didn't have to remember to do that and like pick presents for them. So this is like the personal assistant that I think everybody wants. Like, go integrate with this system, this system, this system. I can send you a voice message and my assistant will just go and do it using agentic tools. I think that it's like anything popular, there's like a ton of fun going around. Yeah. So I think, and every security vendor is coming out of the woodwork to talk about how scary this is and like how their startup is uniquely positioned to solve it. Like realistically, I think that the from what I saw last night, the OpenClaw people put a lot of thought into it and they have very reasonable suggestions. Like they suggest deploy it local host only, have a tail scale to your phone. Like that makes sense. So like don't have it on the internet. They're very clear about that. And then they very clearly call out like prompt injection is for sure a risk here. And so like what that actually means, like for me, like I'm going to feel very stupid if my email gets leaked. So I'm probably not just going to give agent like full access to do stuff on my email. If I did want to use it, what I might do is set up something like a Google forwarding rule that looks for keywords and forwards copies of those to an email box that like this agent can use, and like purges them or something. And then now the agent, even if it gets prompt injected or it just hallucinates or whatever, like its impact is limited. It's like separate from me. So I'm can't imagine that like Google or OpenAI like haven't thought like, oh, we should have a personal assistant. I think what is unique about OpenClaw is that they just released the thing as open source and said, here it is. We've put thought into it. Like use it at your own risk.
It's wild, and it went viral overnight. Do you think OpenClaw will become like the operating model for how people use personal assistants, which is like, let's say, open source harness and framework that you deploy internally, plus maybe self-deployed models like those what do they call them, the Mac Minis, I think, have gone viral because they can host some of these models around inference. Do you think that's going to be the way that people start to use these personal AI assistants because they need that local and open source deployment to feel comfortable with the data and access they're giving? Or do you think this is just a fad and like in 3 months people are going to move on from OpenClaw to something totally different?
No, I mean, for sure not. Like I think we hear about it a lot because we're kind of in this bubble, but I bet my sister hasn't heard about it. Like if for this thing to actually be mass market, people aren't going to get a Mac Mini and like deploy some open source thing on it. This needs to be turnkey. And I think the reason it's not turnkey is because nobody that would sell a turnkey service has figured out how to make this exactly safe. And OpenClaw is a concession that, yeah, it's not perfectly safe, but like also it's powerful. So if you're willing to use it at your own risk, then like here it is.
Yeah. One of the things that I think is actually really interesting when you say, we live in this bubble, I feel like this bubble has impacts on the rest of the market and the economy and broad. Over the last week, there's been this massive compression in SaaS growth multiples in particular. So whether, pick your favorite ticker of a SaaS growth stock that was a darling last year, like a lot of these organizations down 30, 40, 50, 60%. And one of the underlying narratives, I don't know if this is what's driving the market, but one of the things that at least people say on X is that there's a concern that AI agents and AI-led software development is going to replace a lot of these companies. And that, whatever you were paying $1 million for yesterday for your CRM, now you can go and use like, a tool or vibe code one a lot more easily. You're at a company that basically is, I'm just going to say is like the focal point of vibe coding is like, go ahead and like run something within Cursor and like see what comes out. What do you think? Is this like reaction overstated, about right for like where the future of SaaS goes? Goldman Sachs has this brilliant chart that I think has gone viral more recently, even though it's actually a little bit old. Talked about the shift in the addressable market from agentic TAM versus SaaS TAM. What do you think about the reaction that it's basically come up over the last couple of weeks?
Okay, so very quick, not correction, but like I hate the term vibe coding.
Great.
Like I think AI development like is a thing. So
why do you hate the term vibe coding? Like what's wrong? What do you hate about it?
I think the implication to me is that you're not paying attention to the software that you produce. And like that's not how I use it. And I don't think that's really what we've built Cursor for. I think Cursor is you and the agent like very actively collaborating on like building software. So vibe coding to me is just like a more hands-off approach. And there probably are, tools for people that just are like, yeah, go make me a whatever, and I don't care how it works. And like, to be completely honest, like I have done vibe coding with Cursor before. I just do it in like low stakes environments. So like I have a personal project where I'm like, go make me an iPhone app. And if it has bugs, then I'll tell it to fix. But like, I don't really care if it's right or not. Yeah. Okay. So now your question about SaaS. Yeah. I mean, this is fascinating. The way I think about it, and, like, just be very clear, this is not like company opinion. This is my personal opinion. There have been a lot of like rent takers in software. So like I build a CRM, or I build like note-taking software, and I build it in a way that's like general market, like we ran companies, we know how this goes. Like you don't build the exact right solution for one company. You build the one that's like general enough, but like also like sanely maintainable. So it's going to solve 80% of that company's use case, and the other 20%, like maybe not so. And because it's a pain, like you had to, hire all these engineers and build it and fix bugs and whatever, like that process costs a lot of money. And now you can like extract rent. You can say, my solution is going to cost your org $300,000 a year. But like actually from a customer's perspective, like you didn't want all of that other stuff. Like those aren't your use cases. And also like the one piece of it that you do want is not that hard to build. So I think what it's going to do is reduce some leverage for companies that were rent taking that way. And in general, like I'm not sure that like every company is going to end up, reinventing Slack and Zoom and whatever. It probably doesn't make any sense, but I do think that we're going to end up more in the era of personalized software. And what that's going to mean is more composable building blocks and less leverage to come and say like, it's $1 million, like take it or leave it.
So your point of view might be like, if we thought about this over a multi-year period, the compression, there's some part of it at least that's justified, given like what you think is going to be some of the changes in how these SaaS workflows actually get built and the ASP they might be able to command as a result of it.
Yeah, I mean, generally, I've been waiting for this for a while.
I love that take. We got to start that with where, I think the reaction on the SaaS multiple compression side. Travis, this has been a great conversation. One of the questions that I love to end by being able to ask is, AI is so much the focal point for everyone's attention. There's so much hype and other things along those that I always find that one of the most challenging questions is, what is an area or something within AI you think is undervalued? Something people aren't spending as much time on?
Like AI in general or like AI coding?
AI in general, but if you want to answer within AI coding, that's totally fine too. And while you think, I'll give you the background. This was a question that one of our lead investors asked me 3 years before we actually even did our seed investment with him. This is in 2017, and machine learning and deep learning were taking off. I really said that I thought the piece that was most undervalued was like data infrastructure and data labeling for AI. And so Scale was, I want to say, a Series C, Series D company approximately, I think at that point. And I really felt like those were needed in order to be able to drive the next wave. I didn't expect things to go nearly where they did, but that was like a clear area where I felt like things were undervalued relative to the hype that other tooling we're getting. Curious what you think might be today. And I'll admit it's a lot harder now in 2026 when everyone's talking about AI than it was in 2017.
No, I'll give two answers. So I'll give Daniel Miessler's smart answer, which I read the other day, and he did a LinkedIn post. But I think software is done really well because you have this like validation loop, like it compiles or it doesn't. And so we've been able to iterate, and that's what's required to have models grow in these other areas. So I think like finding ways to tell the model, like for sure, this thing you did is better than this thing over here in areas beyond software. That's going to be big. And then my like not so intelligent take is just learning in general. Like the biggest way that I've used AI, and this is very important in security. Like we are constantly being forced to jump into an area and learn enough about it that we can make a decision or fix something or whatever. So that has been huge for me. Like just the rate at which I can learn something through AI by saying, go search the internet, give me a digest. I ask a question, it goes does more research. I ask questions until I understand that. That loop has gotten so fast. And I think that, I'm using it this way, but I doubt like most people in the population that need to learn things are doing it that way. So I would say that's going to expand outwards just because it's so much more powerful. I mean, you can think about what happened with like search engines and then what happened with Wikipedia. Like so much learning has been condensed. And I think we just made a big step change in learning that most people don't know yet.
Yeah, I love it. Learning and research, I think, have like fundamentally changed the workflows for like how I've started to understand anything about a new domain. Travis, this has been a great episode. Thank you so much for coming on board and talking about everything from OpenClaw to the security practices at Netflix Databricks and how Cursor is not vibe coding, but actually maybe more intentional than that. This was a fantastic conversation. And, to everyone in the audience, thank you very much for tuning in. And please let us know who you'd like to be able to see on as a guest, in our next episode too. In the meantime, remember to stay in the details and we'll make sure to catch you soon. Thank you, Travis.
Super fun. Thank you.